Hello and welcome to today's webinar, Addressing Global Issues Starts with Community. My name is Glenda Cooper and I'm a manager of cities for Cities Deepening Community, and I'm here to introduce today's discussion. I'm so thrilled that we have Jim Diers and Cathy Urquhart with us. So Jim, some of you have met him before. He has a real passion for getting people engaged with their communities and in the decisions that affect their lives. His work in the Seattle Department of Neighborhoods was recognized with an Innovation Award from the Kennedy School of Government. He was appointed the first director of Seattle's Department of Neighborhoods in 1988, where he served under 3 mayors over the next 14 years, creating what some would say is a miracle of neighborhoods, where he put his passion to work for a direct action neighborhood association, a community development corporation, a community foundation, and the nation's largest healthcare cooperative. He teaches courses at the University of Washington and serves on the faculty of the Asset-Based Community Development Institute. Jim travels internationally to deliver speeches and presents workshops on neighbors and neighborhoods. And his book, Neighbor Power, Building Community the Seattle Way, is available in both English and Chinese editions. And I know I have read that book and have been fully inspired. So Jim, thank you for being here today and welcome.
My pleasure. Great to be here.
That's awesome. And Cathy has dedicated many decades to the social services sector, holding positions from frontline to CEO while balancing teaching within the social service worker program at Fanshawe. Cathy has been recognized for her unique contribution to the community development sector of the social service worker program with a President's Distinguished Teaching Award from Fanshawe College. And Cathy used John McKnight's text, Building Communities from the Inside Out, a path toward identifying and mobilizing a community's assets to build the foundation of the community development curriculum. She has created innovative practices, implemented rich community-based learning experiences for students, and mobilizes citizens to work together to build strong communities. Cathy is a proud board member of the Westminster College Foundation as well. Cathy, we are so delighted that you are also here today. Welcome.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
So I have to say it has been my pleasure as we've been getting ready for this webinar, because Jim and Cathy and I started working a while ago when we were still planning for the Celebrating Neighbours gathering that was supposed to happen in June of 2020, and now will be happening in June 2021. And they are 2 of the masterclass facilitators. And so here they are, we've got their brilliant minds for the next hour. And so I'm so delighted to dig in with you guys. So I just say, fasten your seatbelts and let's go. You guys ready?
Yeah.
Yes.
Awesome. So I would like to start with a really just kind of a simple, what seems like simple question. And maybe I'll toss it to Jim first. Jim, why is community important?
Well, I think the title for the webinar says it all. Addressing global issues starts with community. So let me break that down. First of all, I think community is the key to engagement. People generally as individuals feel powerless. They feel overwhelmed by the issues, whether or not they're global. But it's when people work together as a community, especially at the local level, that they feel some sense of agency. You know, a lot of local governments don't get this. They want to immediately rush out and start engaging citizens. But what they don't realize is people aren't going to engage with government if they aren't even engaged with their neighbors. So the first step is just to bring people together to build that sense of community. So community is the key to engagement. Secondly, the community has incredible resources that it can bring to bear to address these issues. So oftentimes we forget about those resources. We think all the resources are in the budgets of government, but the community has, every individual in the community has all kinds of skills and knowledge and passions that can be leveraged to address these issues. And particularly the gifts that we're missing out on are those people who we've labeled as needy. And just to remember that absolutely everybody has gifts that we can mobilize to address these huge issues. In addition to that, we have dozens of formal and informal associations in every neighborhood that can be mobilized to work on issues. We've got the underutilized resources in our physical environment. We've got the local economy. We've got our local history, culture, all of which can be mobilized to address these huge issues. And right now, we're missing out on most of those resources. And then finally, I would argue that while there's a role for government and other agencies and professionals, there's absolutely no substitute for community when it comes to addressing the issues that we care most deeply about. And I think one of those that's most paramount right now is the issue of just care for one another. And while we definitely need those frontline workers, we need the health workers, what we've often forgotten about is that most care is freely given. It comes from our families, it comes from our friends and others in our community. It's the key to dealing with global issues like climate change, right? It's like, we aren't going to deal with climate change unless people feel some sense of responsibility around their actions. What can I do to recycle? What can I do to use less fuel? How can I live more sustainably on this earth? It's when we feel some sense of connection to each other that we act more responsibly towards the earth. It's when we are in community that we realize our actions will make a difference. And we start working together on projects like reforestation projects or creating organic community gardens, things that will improve the environment. It's when we are in community that we feel some sense of power and we can actually advocate with government for policies that are friendly towards the earth. Community is the key to crime prevention. Again, we need professionals, we need police officers to enforce laws, but only communities can actually prevent crime. Community is a key to disaster response. We always see that. Community is at its best when there's a crisis. We're clearly seeing that with the pandemic. But when the earthquakes come, when there's flooding, when there's fires, the first responders are always our neighbors. Those are the ones we can count on. Those are the people we need the most. Health promotion. Again, our health practices are influenced by our community. Our mental health is influenced by our community. The social determinants of health, things like our income, our physical environment, our natural environment, are much more influenced by our neighbors than by healthcare professionals. So we absolutely need community. And finally, I would say social justice. You know, social justice, no major social change has ever come top down. It's all come bottom up. So without strong communities, we can't make change. So community is absolutely key. I can't think of anything more important than community. And clearly, community is key to our own happiness. And I think we're really discovering that with the pandemic, how much we miss community and how much we need community. And it's something we've often taken for granted, but now that we're isolated, I think we long for community more than ever. Sorry, long answer, short question.
Those are the best kind, and thank you. And I to Cathy, you know, yeah. What else are you thinking just around that? Why is community important?
At a real basic level, community is important because it makes us feel good. It feels good to be a part of a group that shares something in common, something we can be passionate about, and thus feeling less lonely. So I think, I mean, Jim said it all, like there's so much. Community connects us to others and creates a strong sense of belonging for us. So that's really all I can add. It's just on a real personal level, just how good it feels when you're a part of that community, when you're a part of that engagement that's happening and building that's going on.
I really appreciate that, right? Like it's about that feeling. It's the root of all of the work that we really value and we think is super important and want to dig into, and that's where community is. But this place of belonging and the healthcare, all of these things, like, can we talk just a little bit more? Can you, like, let's talk a little bit more about how we see the role of, or the importance of community within our current context, because we're kind of at a unique point in history, and it's an opportunity for community to really rise up and shine, or not. So I'm wondering, maybe Cathy, if I can toss it back to you to just talk a little bit more about how you see that, the importance of community within our current context.
Yeah, I mean, further to Jim, in my opinion, all our communities are more important than ever right now, as we struggle with social isolation, uncertainty, and fear. And I have to think fear seems to be rising to the top of many conversations right now. And I know I'm looking to my communities for support during this difficult time. You know, we're all just kind of looking at our connections, our relationships, and I'm also looking at, as Jim mentioned earlier, government, and many of our governments during this period of time have stepped up financially to add dollars wherever they can. But what's really apparent is that communities' needs and concerns far outweigh what the government can provide financial support for. And and personally, I don't think that they need to provide all the financial support for community. But so as a resort, we have to look to our communities, to all our communities of place, our communities of interest, our communities of culture, to fill those gaps. And I think Jim's already talked about, you know, kind of that interconnectedness of it takes all of us to actually kind of shift the tide, if you will. And we're in it, we're in the midst. And so it's really uncharted territory that I think we're going to have to start to look to build. And I'd go over to you, Jim, to add kind of, you know, you've given us a lot of context to kind of set the stage. And so, you know, where do you see us currently, and how we can continue to build?
Well, I'm with you, Kathy. I think this is a time of great fear, but it's also a time of great opportunity and hope. I think the pandemic is making it very clear that we're all in this together.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, you know, sometimes sort of a trite phrase, but I think it's really meaningful to me. I think we do need to recognize that some of us have more privileges than others. Some people are a whole lot more vulnerable than others. But whenever some of us are at risk, we're all at risk. I think many of us have parents who are in nursing homes, like I do.
And
Many of us have know people who have died, as I do. And I think a combination of empathy and self-interest is causing us to do what we can to slow the pandemic and to help other people cope with it. You know, people are out there making masks. They're supporting housebound neighbors,
mm-hmm.
finding ways to socialize. But I think the pandemic is also highlighting issues of social injustice. You know, poor people are more likely to contract the virus due to inadequate access to nutritious food, to housing, paid leave. Also at risk are farm workers, those workers in the meat processing plants, prisoners, and others who are required to work in close proximity to one another. Their vulnerability makes everyone more vulnerable. So we all have an interest in addressing injustice.
Mm-hmm.
Many communities now are participating in actions to try to get vulnerable people out of jail, to close local detention centers, to provide support for immigrants, benefits, and that kind of thing. Likewise, we're learning, you know, I think we're feeling a lot of empathy about our local grocery workers and the delivery trucks and the, you know, all those people who are making our life better, who are absolutely essential to our welfare, who we've kind of taken for granted over time. And we're realizing these people are really important parts of our community who are getting often left behind, making low wages, often not being able to afford to live in housing in the very communities in which they work. So I'm hoping that this gets us a lot more attuned to issues of social justice. You know, all those caregivers that people rely on, they've been there for us. Now we need to be there for them. And I think this whole, the pandemic is also creating this incredible economic crisis right now where we're all feeling more vulnerable. Personally, I haven't had any work since February, and I won't through August and probably longer than that. I'm okay. You know, I've got some savings, I've got Medicare, but it's made me a whole lot more conscious of all those people who are really having a tough time right now, really having a tough time. So I think it's a really important, great opportunity to rededicate ourselves to issues of social justice. And finally, I think the pandemic is getting us a lot more conscious about climate change. You know, there's so many fewer airplanes in the sky. I'm enjoying the quiet. There's fewer cars on the road. The air is getting cleaner. There's less opportunity to shop. And many people, I think, are starting to slow down if we have that luxury. And enjoying nature. I just saw an article about how there's so many more bird watchers right now. I've been doing a lot of photography out in nature and just really appreciate nature. But I think it's also an opportunity to reflect and think about how do we continue some of these practices? How do we live in a way that's more sustainable in the future? So, I think to me, that's the great impact of the pandemic, is both rediscovering the importance of community and also using community as a way to act on those issues that are really important to us, caring for one another, dealing with social justice, and addressing the issues of climate change.
Thank you. You kind of have answered all of my questions, but I'm going to keep asking.
Okay,
you.
I'll head back outside now.
Because I think sometimes when we just shift the question just slightly, we get different answers. And so,
okay.
Let's keep digging in. You know, we were talking about, like, we are living history right now, and the role of community is changing, but how is it shifting? We've talked about where there's fear and where there's hope, and what is it that is really driving your hope, and how are you seeing community being expressed within the requirements of physical distancing? Because it's a whole new world for us. So,
boy, that's a lot of questions, Glenda.
I know, because
well,
pick one and go with it.
Well, I guess the first one, just around social distancing. In some ways, you know, social distancing, when we practice it, it's sort of an expression of our care for others as well as for ourselves. It does make it more difficult to build relationships, but people are getting creative. I've never done more Zooming in my life than I have during the pandemic. Just, you know, I was with my family last night. We've got this called, I'm just all the time, I'm on Zoom, connecting with people. I probably interacted with my neighbors more than I have ever, because I see them outdoors. We're taking walks, and you can still have conversations from 6 feet away. You know, it's so it hasn't stopped our connections. I don't think the role of community is shifting. What I think is more people are becoming aware of community and the importance of community. What is shifting is that people are getting more connected to one another. People are getting more connected to themselves. They're reassessing what's important in their lives and how to live in a way that's consistent with their values. People are getting more connected to nature and the issue of climate change. People are getting more connected to the plight of others and issues of social injustice. And I think maybe most importantly, people are getting connected to their neighborhood. You know, a lot of us are confined to our neighborhood right now. And I think that's key. It's at the neighborhood level that people are most likely to engage with others, and where we can really build inclusive community, where we get together with people who have different politics, different religions, different interests, and connect, just because we all live in the same place. The pandemic, social justice, and climate change are all global issues, but they lend themselves to action at the neighborhood level. And when all neighborhoods are pushing in the same direction as we are with the pandemic, that's when we can make change. I saw this great quote from Amanda Abrams. She said, "After all, in a world where the social fabric seems to be rapidly fraying, The economy is uncertain, and the future of the planet is at risk. Is there a better way to hit the reset button than to come back to the neighborhood level and begin to genuinely rely on one another once again? I thought that was a powerful quote, and I think there's so much truth to that, that, you know, action begins at home.
Yeah. Yeah, I want to build on some of what you're saying, Jim, just from kind of my perspective of one living rule in the country where I'm not normally in this setting. I'm usually in the city. And so this is really kind of stretching my boundaries as well. And I want to say, as a result of the pandemic and physical distancing, I think our collective attention, at least what I'm getting, is the attention shifting to the importance of relationships and community. So not that community shifting per se, but just people's eyes are on, as you already indicated, relationships and the importance of relationships and community. And in the beginning of the shutdown, I can say personally for me, the focus was on national leaders, looking to national leaders for answers, for certainty, for direction, and recognizing that that wasn't coming.
Yeah.
The attention, the spotlight started to shift to local leaders, local heroes, local efforts, acts of caring, right? Where citizens were coming together to use their individual and collective assets to meet local needs of the most vulnerable. So really people started to, I think, you know, their sights started to shift as well as their actions, just as you've been saying, and many are looking for ways to contribute to citizens because they want to recognize the value of community and they want to feel like they belong. And so they're really trying to step forward and engage with community citizens and assist with needs during this time of historic challenge, to take care of each other. And so I think that, you know, everything you're saying is absolutely spot on, in that, you know, we're really taking a global issue, a global pandemic, and thinking globally and acting locally. We're really starting to actually practice that in a very tangible way.
It's good to hear that that is true in Canada as well as here, Cathy. I thought we were the only ones who realized that there was no hope with our national government and we had to focus on our neighbors.
Yeah.
I think you are actually much better off than we are.
It maybe just took us a little longer to get there.
It was staring us right in the face.
That's right. It was very short-lived.
Yeah, so I think it's yeah, it's like you said, you know, a time of really reflection of people, kind of what's important.
Yep.
The questions are, you know, I've had people say to me, what are you really looking forward to when this social distancing is over? What's really important to us?
Yep.
Yeah, that's such a good question. But I think we should come back to that one. I think.
Yep.
Yeah, I think we will, kind of in the end. Maybe.
I think so. But before we jump ahead, you know, we've talked about like how it's so, like, things are shifting a little bit because we're giving more space for community, where our eyes are more tuned to what's happening in community. Do you have any examples? Like, let's get really tangible here. What examples do you have, or have you heard of, about the role of community during this pandemic? Like, let's get real for a minute. And for those of you who have joined us, if you have stories that you want to share, if you want to pop them into the chat box, that would be fantastic. We'd love to hear how you're seeing community emerge right where you live as well. So please feel free to share. And I think we'll be able to have some time to read some of those out. So please do share. But while people are writing, Cathy, Jim?
I have one that I love. It's and I read about it, so I don't have firsthand knowledge. I'm not a participant in this, but it's a senior citizen living in Toronto, and she's line danced every week. She's taught line dancing in the local YMCA, and to seniors. And then when the shutdown happened, all the rec centers were closed. She went home and I guess went, now what am I going to do? And went and bought what we would call a boombox or something. It's called a speaker system or something, but she went and bought a speaker and went out into her neighborhood in the street, turned on her music and started line dancing. And people were coming out of their houses. And so it started with a couple of people in her neighborhood. And now it's like, there's like dozens of people, I understand, coming out onto the street with her, obviously socially distanced. And the age range, she said, is between 10 and 76 of people line dancing, and she's doing it every day. And so her need to say, let's stay active, let's connect, let's stay active, let's be healthy, is really transpired into this community of line dancers, which I just thought was awesome. I'd love to be there. We can't really do it in the country because we don't have very many people that would come out of their house, but but I just think that's awesome. And there's other examples, but I'll just start with that one, and I just think it's a cool one.
That's a great story, Kathy. That's really cool. I want to join Glenda, just encouraging people to share their own stories. I'd love to hear stories from other places, because I think stories are so critical. You know, stories kind of give us ideas about what we might do ourselves, and realize we are all in this together, and you know, collectively we're making a difference. I have a few stories from Seattle. First story is really similar to the one Kathy just shared. There's a guy in the Ballard neighborhood who plays, he was practicing his bass string instrument in his house, and he said, God, I'm tired of hanging out in my house, and the weather's great outside, so he went out and started playing in his front yard. Well, it wasn't long before neighbors came out of their homes and all started listening to him practicing his bass. And then he realized, you know, I'm really not that good at the bass. What I'm good at is opera. So he started singing opera. People loved it. The next day he came home and everybody was out in their front yards, and they said, are you going to perform tonight? He said, well, I guess I better. So he's been doing this now every night at 5 o'clock. He comes out and does an opera performance, and all the neighbors are there practicing social distancing. They're in their front yards, they're in their driveways, but the whole neighborhood's there listening to this opera. Another story from Seattle is a woman in the Columbia City neighborhood who's had one of those little free pantries for 6 years that she's maintained, so that people who are food insecure can have access to food. So she put something out on social media saying she was willing to build more little free pantries for people who would be willing to steward those in their own neighborhood. She got 26 requests. So she connected with other people, and together they built 26 little free pantries and delivered them to places all around the neighborhood. So now all kinds of people have access to produce. And finally, there's a story from an international district in Chinatown. And there was this guy who was riding through his bike through Chinatown, was going past his favorite restaurant, the Jade Restaurant, and was devastated to see that it was being closed down, that they were covering the windows with plywood. So he got off his bike, he went in and talked to the owner, said, what's going on? He said, are you closing? And the owner said, no, we aren't closing, we had vandalism. Somebody broke out our windows. And so we had to cover them with plywood. So this guy got on social media and put out a call for artists. And within a half hour, 5 Latino artists responded and said, we'll volunteer to create murals on that plywood. And this started a movement. Now there are windows all over the city of Seattle in neighborhood business districts, dozens of them, that are covered with beautiful, beautiful murals done by local artists. And each mural, I mean, they're beautiful. They have messages about caring for one another, messages about supporting local health, supporting frontline workers, messages about staying safe, messages about supporting local businesses. But they all collectively just give us a great sense of hope. And they cheer people up. And these are things people are just finding ways to contribute their gifts. They don't have to be a healthcare worker. They're an artist. They're a musician. There's somebody who just has some time and can go out and, in my neighborhood, people are delivering postcards to neighbors saying, do you need help? If, give me a call if you need a delivery, if you need a ride to the doctor, if you need help with childcare. People are just finding all kinds of ways to connect. And that's what's incredibly encouraging to me. I got more stories, but I'd love to hear some from other places.
That's awesome. Hey, Heather. Yay. I know you're watching what's happening in the chat box. Can you share some of the stories that are happening?
I think this is the best job, is reading all of these stories. So I want to go to, there's a couple, I just want to kind of a couple quotes, is that we don't need to go back to normal. We need to go back to better.
Yes.
Yeah.
And Susan Fletcher, sometimes we talk about the before times and we think about the new normal for the future. Some folks are talking about present as the pause. I like this because pause refreshes and gives opportunity for reflection. And I love that. I love it. And then we have Dana. I had a neck surgery in mid-March and was in a neck brace until last week. I was also having trouble talking as a result of the surgery, so literally couldn't do much of anything. But I really wanted to engage somehow with my neighbors. I realized I had about 20 jigsaw puzzles in my closet, so decided to put them on a table in my front yard and offer them free to anyone who wanted one. It wasn't much, but I've heard how much families enjoy spending time together and working through those puzzles. And I actually heard lots of people pulling out the puzzles.
Nice, I did too. Yeah.
Some find it very satisfying and some find it very frustrating. And then, where is Kendra? And then there's lots about kind of groups coming together. So my brother lives in Peterborough, and in the neighborhood, everyone gathers outside on the sidewalk in front of their house. Some days they sing, sometimes they play instruments. And one day, one of the dads dressed up in a chef's costume and ride his unicycle for the kids. Yeah, so there's more. I don't know how much more do you want to go into.
We've got time. We'd love to.
Got time.
Yeah.
So a Chinese community in PEI has been fundraising and supporting the needs across PEI, food insecurity, senior support. Vietnamese communities fundraising and gave funds to local support, organizations not funded that is helping hundreds of families in need each week. So there's quite a few stories about fundraising and pulling our gifts and assets together to help others. And then here's in London, Ontario, a group called Caremongering, and Glenda just wrote a little blog about caremongering. And they helped in particular vulnerable populations, linking up people with needs to those who can help. And so that's that whole sharing of the gifts and the assets. There's a neighborhood in Paris, Ontario, and I'm saying this one because Paris is my little town, very, very close to me. And they've been doing happy hour, where one of the hours before dinner, people sit on their front porches playing guitar, singing, and having visits from a distance. And I think we're hearing more about the whole front porch, driveway beers, getting together, especially after on Sunday when we had just this beautiful, warm 21-degree weather.
I have one that I have to read. I'm so excited. It's giving me little bits of goosebumps here. So this one's from Tammy, and I'm not sure where she is located, but in her neighborhood, the kids decided they didn't want to connect virtually, because I don't know about you guys, but I also feel the Zoom fatigue sometimes. I want 3D people. So the neighborhood kids decided they didn't want to connect virtually. So they created their own mailboxes and have been busy delivering letters and gifts to the neighbors the old-fashioned way.
That's great.
I just love it. They're doing their own snail mail version.
Actually, you know what? It's probably faster doing it that way than it is doing it through Canada Post right now.
Yes.
Actually, so I have another one here and I love it. I offer free food plants, garlic, chives, rhubarb, and raspberry canes. Being overwhelmed by people from experienced gardeners looking for something different to first-time food gardeners, to people from the Facebook who have showed up to the garden work. And pot up the free offerings. I've met so many more neighbors.
Nice. I want to just make a comment about aged homes. So as Jim mentioned, his folks are in long-term care and aged home, and my parents are both in long-term care. And I have to do a shout out to the staff who are really attempting to do whatever they can to connect their residents with families. And so they're doing FaceTime with residents and their families to try and connect them. And my mom is 98. She'll be 99 in September. And so she thinks it's a camera. And so as she's seeing me, she's looking in this FaceTime, kind of thinking, well, that will take a nice picture. Can you just snap that one? And so her trying to navigate this FaceTime and us is just hilarious. And it's giving us lots of opportunity to laugh together as she's trying to reconcile how we have technology that you can actually see each other.
Yeah.
But they're really reaching out to try and do anything they can to connect their residents in long-term care with their families. And so I have to say that, yeah, their care has just been extraordinary.
Well, there are even stories about caregivers who have moved into the care facility.
Wow.
They've made that commitment where they're there apart from their families. Part of it is to protect their families, but a lot of it is also about how do they support their patients, just
Wow.
above and beyond. And these are people who are not getting paid well, who are facing their own incredible trials. And I think it just helps us be that much more cognizant that we're all in this together and we need to support each other.
And the stories are coming in that it bumps what I really like to talk. I like try to keep in. It's almost like having my sweet children, but virtually online here. But there was somebody who did mention, and I can't find it right now, but it was about having a bagpiper come to, oh, here it is. My mom is in a senior home in residence in Alberta. We can't go see her. So she was so excited to tell me that a piper came and played in the parking lot.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. And then there's another one in here. Where did it go? It was about jujitsu. And it reminded me, a girlfriend of mine did an activity with her son as part of his jujitsu leadership curriculum during this self-isolation. They made popcorn and just distributed it to the neighbors with a note asking them to get outside on a particular day and chalk their walk.
Yeah, good.
And I know of a community, it's a neighborhood in a social housing complex in Oshawa, Ontario, and they are organizing virtual jiu-jitsu. So they have somebody who's doing it, and I'm using our Zoom platform to help them with this. And there's like 10 of them, all the kids, and they're doing jiu-jitsu online, and they've done it for several weeks now, and it's really awesome to see. And then they're actually doing a virtual paint night where they drop the bags off at the houses, and this is in a social housing neighborhood. And so just some really innovative ways in terms of the virtual. And then there's our family started virtual dinners with friends of ours. And the first week we all started Facebook time, same menu, and we have a visit, and they ate together, and they've done seven of them. And there's quite a few stories. Lisa, who is one of our directors, they do theme night, and they dress up in the theme of the food that they're cooking. And so I'm hearing the virtual dinners, which you think about, it used to be Sunday night dinners once a month. And because of this, we're having Sunday night dinners almost every week with our families.
Yes.
Isn't that amazing?
Yes.
I live on an island now, right off of Seattle Vashon Island, and we've had some great actions right on the island. So we had a group forum called the Mask Brigade, and when there was a shortage of medical masks, they asked people to donate theirs, because a lot of people had accumulated them for the forest fires to protect themselves during the summer. And so they had some in storage and gathered thousands of masks that then were given to healthcare workers. And then the Mask Brigade started producing their own masks. And so they've offered them to all the residents on the island. They deliver them to their homes. They make them available to workers in the grocery store, in the pharmacy. Incredible effort. We've got lots of musicians on the island. They were out of work, so they started doing virtual concerts, and we have concerts all the time now on social media, and then people pay with electronic tips. So it's a great way to support the musicians and kind of keep people's morale up. So it's pretty creative ways people are supporting each other.
Mm-hmm.
There's sorry, I'm gonna jump in here because I think we could talk about.
We're getting carried away.
We could, and it's so exciting. And I think that the quote, and I'm gonna get it wrong, but maybe Heather, you can help me with it. The one, like, let's not go back to normal, let's go back to better. And these, I think, oh, we're heading there, and this is like the possibilities that are coming alive. I think are just brilliant. But I want to make sure that we go back to this question that we kind of alluded to earlier, and we're talking about it with the community, we're seeing it in story, but what can we learn from this global pandemic for the future? What do we carry forward, and what does this mean? What does this look like for agencies, for municipalities, for communities? Jim, I like to ask a lot of questions at once, right? So, but what can we learn from this global pandemic? What do we carry forward? I'm gonna throw this your way to start, and then Cathy, I'd love to hear your thoughts as well.
Well, I guess my big hope, and as I said before, I think communities are at their best when there's a crisis. And my friend Cormac Russell says, we shouldn't waste a good crisis, right? So I think the challenge is, how do we keep this, we're really learning and relearning our appreciation for community. We're building much stronger community as a result of the pandemic. How do we hang on to that and realize, if nothing else, that we have lots of other crises we need to address, like climate change, like social justice. And so my hope is that we'll carry this passion for community into the future and reprioritize what's important to us. I also hope that there's some lessons in this for municipalities, local government. These are tough times. They're going to get even tougher with the economy. There are going to be huge budget cuts. They're already starting to happen at the municipal level. And we saw this before with the Great Recession. When that recession happened and there were huge budget cuts, a lot of governments said we need to get back to basics. And what they cut was the community development activities, because they didn't see that as a basic. And I think what we're learning through the pandemic is that there is nothing more basic than community. And what happened with the Great Recession is some governments got it, and they said, because we don't have resources, because we don't have sufficient money, we're going to invest what money we have in the community, because that's where the resources are. And those were the places that tend to be the most successful. So I'm hoping that local government will get it right this time and realize that this is the time where we need to partner with our communities, because that is how we're going to be successful. That's what helped us get through the pandemic, and that is what's going to help us get through some of these other major challenges that we're facing. And it's also going to help us rebuild our democracy. So, we've talked a lot about normal. There's another quote I love, which is one from Dave Hollis. It says, "In the rush to return to normal, use this time to consider which parts of normal are worth rushing back to." And to me, the normal that is worth rushing back to isn't accumulating lots of stuff. It isn't working 24/7. It isn't watching out for ourselves. It's about community. And I think that's the normal that we need to take out of this pandemic and continue to build, because that's the key to everything we care most deeply about. This great opportunity we have to do a little reflection about what's important in our lives. I think we're realizing what's important is each other, and it's about our connection to the earth. And the other stuff really is not what we need to maintain. How can we carry forward with that? How can we work more from home? How can we do less flying? How can we do less shopping and be more sustainable? We need to carry those values into the future. Cathy, what about you?
I concur. I want to go, yes, absolutely, what you're saying. A piece for me that I want to highlight to carry forward is technology and social media is a tool to facilitate community. It can't replace it. And so I think that that's a really important piece.
Yep.
That what we're identifying now with all our Zoom, all our internet connections, we still need face-to-face to experience real satisfaction, to participate in community. So I that's a piece to carry forward. We have to remember, we have
Yep.
to be cognizant of. So for me, that's kind of a piece that, I mean, you've said it all, Jim. I think it's really important time to stop and mark and move forward, and not necessarily look back and say, we've always done it this way, we'll continue. Let's chart new territory. I guess the other, for my hope, is the cooperation will continue, and will create opportunity and make new rules. And I think that I alluded to it in one of our chats earlier as we were planning, is, we say we've got these rules in place that have been there for like 1,000 years and we cannot, we have to follow those rules. We cannot deviate from them. And then all of a sudden, in a blink of an eye, we're making new rules, and people aren't wedded to those 1,000-year-old rules. So we've got the opportunity to do it. We know we can do it. We can make change. And I don't know how much time we have, but I want to talk further just about individuals. Can I do that? Just further to your note, Jim, about kind of the reflection. I think there is a shift to us personally, like that navel gazing right now, that I think is important for us as individuals to really challenge ourselves to reflect who we are, what's important to us, and how can we be better people? How can we be a better person in our communities, because we're involved in multiple communities, and I'm sure many of our listeners today and us, we've been reflecting on it. I'd just like us to encourage that practice, continue to be the change we want to see. And that's pretty cliche, but it really is. It all starts with us, right? And so it's really important to try and be the best we can be, to be, that strong community contributor. So
yeah,
I don't have much more to add than that, other than I have some parting comments, which is just, be kind, be caring, try and be our authentic self and be genuine, right?
Those are great parting comments. But before we let you go, I know that we've been seeing some questions come through, and we asked Heather to come and help us with some of those questions. We have time for a few. Heather, and if you are just thinking about them and you want to put some comments in the question, or some questions in the question box, that would be fantastic. I'm going to turn it over to Heather.
So they're a lot of the questions are coming in are, one group is about the what next, and I think we've really addressed that. What do we do? Not go back to the norm, but look for for better. But the one question I actually really like is, do you think these initiatives will translate to social change locally and globally? and how?
Well, I think we're already seeing some local initiatives change globally. We talked about some of the stories, for example, things people doing the masks, people doing the caremongering. That stuff is it's become viral itself. And people are doing this all over the world. And that's what makes change, is when all neighborhoods start to do it. We often wonder, what difference am I going to make in this thing in my neighborhood? But what we need to realize is we're part of a huge movement, and it needs to start someplace. And we're never going to deal with these global issues if we start with a global issue, because it's too big. People are going to feel like, God, I can't make an impact. I'm pretty powerless to deal with it. But in our neighborhoods, there are all things we can do to start impacting those issues. And when we start spreading those stories and realize we're all in this together, people are working on climate change issues in every neighborhood around the world, it starts to make a difference. So that's my hope, and I think it's part of the power of the stories as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the masks are a really good example, I think, of, here we were, seeing a global issue of health in Wuhan. And locally, I'm not sure that we really, at least I didn't put the emphasis on it. And now with the masks, it seems universal. Everyone's kind of trying to keep each other safe and healthy, is really addressing the global issue from a local perspective.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And kind of feeding into this, Diane's asking, how can communities feed into the future of municipal and healthcare decisions that need to be made? And how can citizens have direct impact? And I think, this could be kind of into that whole recovery strength-based approach. You want to talk about that a little bit more?
I personally see some real mobilization right now, and a willingness actually for municipalities that are listening and watching community. And I think that there's really an attempt, at least what I've seen locally, is at different levels, people coming together to a table that they weren't at before, to talk about the issue, to talk about how they can actually navigate through moving forward. So I think just by breaking down those silos to some degree in integrating people together at the table will hopefully help to build that new paradigm. Jim, do you have any further on that?
I mean, some of it is not waiting to be asked by local government. What do you think? But it's about recognizing you've got power, and your power is your ability to connect with others. One of the best examples I saw, I think, was in Hamilton, Ontario. And there, some neighbors came together and just worked over time to create their own neighborhood plan about the future of their community. And they went to the council and said, here's our plan. We aren't asking you to adopt it. It's our plan, so we're going to implement it. We don't need your permission, but if you'd help us,
Nice.
it would go a lot faster. And local government was really eager to get on board, because there were hundreds of people who'd been involved in this plan and were championing it, putting their own resources into it. So part of it's recognizing the power we have in our communities to influence change in local government, particularly when we're willing to care about it so deeply that we're willing to put our own resources into it. So we're really doing it as a partnership.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I think, kind of going back to Susan Fletcher, who now is a quote that I'm going to say a lot about that time to pause and, reflect, right? And, this is a time for municipalities and cities and towns to pause and reflect, and maybe even ask residents, what did you like during this time? And what did you not like? And then, using that information. So in terms of individuals and residents, when a survey comes by, or, the municipality is asking for feedback, that we actually do give the feedback. And partake in the engagement piece of it. That's one way as an individual to get involved in this and help shape.
And some of it is getting neighborhoods to act in the same way that our municipal governments are, particularly in the states, where the federal government has totally failed us it is our cities that are stepping up and taking action at a local level, and to realize, help local leaders understand that it'd be even more powerful if they also allowed neighborhoods to step up, that we all can make change. And if we're all moving kind of in the same direction, it's gonna have a lot more impact than if we just see ourselves as separate actors, or we just see all the power being within the municipality and forget about the power within our communities that we can mobilize to really make a difference.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I'm just looking at the time, Glenda. I don't know.
Yeah, I think I know there's more questions. I know there's stories. I just thank you for the stories. I want to say this, and we're going to work with them. We want to make sure we capture them and share them, because it's so exciting. I don't know about you, but as I've been reading through them, I'm feeling jazzed and like re-energized. And so we want to make sure we capture and share that. We also know that there's questions that we haven't gotten a chance to get to, but Cathy and Jim, with your permission, I'd like to be able to like share them with you, and maybe we can get some of the frequently asked questions and we'll get those answers back out to people.
That'd be great. I'd love to keep this going. I'd love to hear other people's stories.
Yes.
I certainly haven't figured it all out myself, so I'd love to get other people's thinking on this, to be inspired by their stories. So I'd love to stay in touch.
Perfect.
And
That's fantastic.
Glenda, can we let the cat out of the bag and about our websites that we're creating?
Let's do it. So we have, over the last month, and we're going to continue, is we've been collecting resources and inspiration pieces and thought pieces and stories and stories and stories about how communities are coming together. And so we're going to be launching very soon our website based just on the stories. So you'll be able to come to the Cities Deepening Community website on the Tamarack Institute page, and it'll be a clearinghouse. So if you're feeling be inspired or want some new thinking, come check us out. And if you have something that we don't have on there, send it our way. We would love to include it. This is awesome. A space that's supposed to be growing, and we'll keep adding to it. So please share it.
And these stories that are in here will be in there.
Awesome.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah, we will make sure we include them in there. So thank you, everyone. And I just, I am aware of the time, but I want to say, Cathy, Jim, do you have any final thoughts that you'd like to share? Final thoughts.
I'll defer to you, Jim. I said mine.
I don't have much to add. I really liked what Cathy said, that social media has helped us get connected during this time, but I'm so eager to get back and actually connect in real time with people. And what I really miss are hugs. So in the meantime, here's a virtual hug for all of you. And look forward to the time where we can do it in person. So thanks everybody for what you're doing in your own communities. It's been incredibly inspiring to me to see how people are stepping up, and to just encourage us to not forget this time and how important community is, because that's the key to a good future for all of us.